A farmer took in a lost alien girl. Now his barn's full of eggs and she calls him husband. The farm sat alone at the edge of the plains, where the dirt road ended and tall cornfields swallowed all sound. Ethan Rowe had lived there most of his life. He was not a man who liked noise, crowds, or questions. He woke before sunrise, fed his animals, fixed what broke, and spoke only when needed. The sky was usually his only company, wide and quiet. That night, the sky broke its promise. Ethan was closing the barn doors when the air began to hum. At first he thought it was thunder far away, but the sound did not roll or fade. It stayed sharp, like metal grinding against the wind. The chickens panicked. The cows kicked at their stalls. Even the old farm dog hid under the porch, whining. Ethan stepped outside. The stars above flickered, then vanished behind a burning line of light that tore across the sky. It fell fast, too fast for any plane. The ground shook as something crashed beyond the cornfields, sending birds screaming into the dark. For a long moment, Ethan stood still. He had lived through storms and fires, but this felt different. The air smelled sharp, like burned wires and rain mixed together. He locked the barn and went inside the house, telling himself it was nothing he could handle tonight. But sleep never came. The hum stayed in his ears, even when the night went quiet again. At first light, Ethan took his rifle and walked toward the cornfields. He expected wreckage, maybe a broken satellite or some military junk. What he found instead was a wide circle of crushed corn and a shallow crater burned into the soil. In its center lay twisted metal, smooth and dark, nothing like any machine he had seen before. He took one careful step forward. A sound came from the edge of the crater. It was not a growl or a scream. It was soft, broken, and afraid. Ethan turned slowly. Between two bent rows of corn, something moved. He lowered the rifle. A girl stepped into view. She was small, about the size of a human teenager, but nothing else about her was normal. Her skin shimmered faintly like oil on water. Her eyes were too large, glowing softly even in daylight. Strange markings ran along her arms and neck, pulsing faintly as she breathed. She wore a torn suit that looked grown, not sewn, and one leg dragged as she tried to stand. When she saw Ethan, she froze. Her eyes widened further and she raised her hands in a weak, pleading gesture. She spoke, but the sounds meant nothing to him. Ethan did not move. He had faced wild animals before, but this was different. She was scared, bleeding from a cut along her side, and shaking so badly she could barely stand. Slowly, he set the rifle on the ground. "It's all right," he said, not knowing why. "I'm not going to hurt you." She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Then she collapsed. Ethan reached her just before she hit the ground. She was lighter than she looked. Her skin felt warm, almost too warm, and hummed faintly under his hands. The blood that stained her suit was dark and thick. He looked back at the wreckage, then at the open sky. People would ask questions, too many questions. He carried her toward the barn. Inside, he laid her on a pile of clean hay. The animals were restless, but none attacked. In fact, the cows leaned closer, sniffing the air, calmer than before. Ethan cleaned her wound with water and cloth, surprised when the bleeding slowed quickly on its own. She woke as the sun climbed higher. Her eyes snapped open, glowing brighter. She pulled back, trying to crawl away, but pain stopped her. Ethan stepped back, raising his hands. "It's okay," he said again. "You're safe." She stared at him, chest rising fast. Then she spoke again, slower this time. The sounds were careful, like she was trying to build meaning from nothing. Ethan shook his head gently. "I don't understand." She frowned, then touched her chest. "Lyra," she said. Ethan pointed to himself. "Ethan." She repeated it badly, but with effort. "Ethan." They stayed like that for a while, trading small words, gestures, and silence. She drank water when he offered it. She ate the bread he brought, though she seemed unsure at first. When she finished, she bowed her head toward him in a strange, formal way. That was when Ethan noticed the sky change again. Far above the farm, a faint silver line moved across the clouds. It was slow, controlled, searching. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Lyra noticed it too. Her markings pulsed brighter. She scrambled to her feet despite the pain and grabbed his arm, her grip strong for someone so small. Her eyes filled with fear and she shook her head hard. "No," she said, the word clear this time. "They hunt." Ethan followed her gaze to the sky. "How long do we have?" he asked quietly, though he knew she could not answer. The silver line vanished into the clouds, but the feeling stayed. That night Ethan did not sleep. He sat in the barn with a lantern, watching over Lyra as she rested. Outside, the wind carried a low hum that did not belong to the earth. Somewhere beyond the stars, something had noticed the farm, and it was coming. Morning came slowly to the farm, as if the land itself was unsure whether it was safe to wake up. Ethan Rose stepped out of the house with a mug of weak coffee, his eyes lifting to the sky before anything else. It looked normal. Blue, wide, empty, but he no longer trusted it. Inside the barn, Lyra was awake. She sat on the hay, knees pulled close to her chest, watching the light slip in through the wooden cracks. When she saw Ethan, her shoulders relaxed. Her markings glowed faintly, steady and calm now. She no longer looked like she might run. Ethan placed food and water beside her again. She ate more easily today, tearing the bread with small sharp teeth he tried not to stare at. When she finished, she pressed one hand to her stomach and spoke slowly. "Safe here." Ethan hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe it. "For now," he said. She seemed to understand the feeling, if not the words. Her gaze drifted toward the barn floor. She touched the ground, then looked up at him, uncertain. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked softly. Lyra stood and walked to the far corner of the barn, near the old storage pit Ethan used for grain long ago. She brushed away straw and dirt, then knelt. Her hands began to glow brighter as she pressed them into the soil. The ground warmed. Ethan took a step back. The dirt shifted, softening like wet clay. Lyra worked slowly, breathing hard, sweat forming on her skin. When she finished, there was a hollow space beneath the floorboards, smooth and round. She looked up at Ethan, her face pale. "Home," she said. Then she added another word, one she had practiced all morning. "Young." Ethan frowned. "Young what?" She did not answer. Instead, she lay down on her side, curling in on herself. Her markings flashed once sharply. She cried out, a sound half pain, half effort. Ethan rushed to her side. Hey, what's happening?" She grabbed his sleeve, not in fear this time, but as if she needed him there. Her body shook. The air around her hummed, low and deep, vibrating through the barn beams. Then Ethan saw it. Between the hay and the dirt, something pushed upward. A smooth shape emerged, glowing faint blue. Then another. And another. Eggs. They were large, almost the size of watermelons, their shells clear and strong like glass mixed with stone. Soft light pulsed inside them, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Lyra collapsed back into the hay, breathing hard. Ethan stared at the eggs, his mouth dry. "How many?" he whispered. Lyra turned her head, exhaustion heavy in her eyes. "5," she said. Ethan sat down heavily on a crate. His barn, his quiet, forgotten barn, now holding alien eggs. Outside, the cows shifted, uneasy. The dog barked once, then went silent. Ethan rubbed his face. "All right," he muttered. "All right." Over the next 2 days, the farm changed. The eggs grew warmer. The air in the barn stayed clean and fresh no matter how long the doors stayed closed. The animals calmed instead of panicking. Even the old tractor started on the first try without complaint. Lyra recovered quickly. She walked with more strength now, learning new words every hour. She followed Ethan as he worked, watching him fix fences and carry feed, asking short questions. "Why alone?" she asked one afternoon. Ethan shrugged. "Less trouble." She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. On the third day, someone came down the dirt road. Ethan heard the truck before he saw it. He stiffened, wiping his hands on his jeans. Few people ever came this way, fewer still without calling ahead. The truck stopped near the fence. A man climbed out, tall and lean, wearing dusty clothes and a tool belt slung over one shoulder. He raised a hand in greeting. "Morning," the man called. "Name S. Owen. My scanner picked up something strange near here. Thought I'd check." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Scanner, energy work," Owen said casually. "Old habit. You see anything fall from the sky a few nights back?" Ethan paused. Then he shook his head. "Storm maybe." Owen smiled, but his eyes did not relax. "Mind if I take a look around?" Before Ethan could answer, Lyra stepped out of the barn. Owen froze. For a split second, his calm mask dropped. His hand moved toward his belt. Lyra looked at Ethan, confused by the tension. "Friend?" she asked. Ethan stepped forward fast. "She's hurt, crashed out here." "I'm helping her." Owen studied her closely. The glow of her markings reflected in his eyes. "That's not human," Owen said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied, "but she's not dangerous." Owen exhaled slowly. "That depends on who's looking for her." As if summoned by the words, the air above the farm shifted. A deep shadow passed over the fields. High above, shapes moved against the sky, silent, watching. Lyra gasped. Her markings flared bright white. She grabbed Ethan's arm with both hands. "They found me," she whispered. Owen followed her gaze. His face went pale. "You've got about a day," he said. "Maybe less." Ethan looked at his barn, at the eggs hidden beneath the floor, at the quiet land he had protected all his life. He straightened his shoulders. "Then they'll have to come through me," he said. Far above, unseen eyes locked onto the farm, and this time they were not alone. The shadow in the sky did not leave. All through the night, faint shapes moved behind the clouds. No lights, no sound, just a feeling of pressure, like the sky was leaning down on the land. Ethan stayed awake in the barn with Owen and Lyra. The eggs beneath the floor pulsed with slow light, warming the wood under their feet. Owen worked quietly near the door, unpacking tools that did not look like farm equipment. Small metal plates, thin wires, a hand scanner that hummed softly. He moved with calm speed, but his face was tight. "They won't attack right away," Owen said. "They like control, fear first." Lyra sat close to the eggs, her hands resting on the floor as if she could feel them breathing. Her eyes were closed, her markings glowing in slow patterns. "They are watchers," she said. "They wait for mistake." Ethan leaned against a post, arms crossed. "Then we don't make one." Lyra opened her eyes and looked at him. She studied his face carefully, like she was reading something deeper than words. "You are bound," she said. Ethan frowned. "Bound how?" She stood and faced him fully. She placed one hand over her chest, then reached out and touched his arm, gently but clearly. "You sheltered me. You guarded eggs, you stand between hunter and life." Owen looked up sharply. "That sounds serious." Lyra nodded. "In my people's law, that is bond, protector bond." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't agree to anything like that." "You did by action," she replied simply. She straightened her posture, her voice growing more formal, stronger. "By my law, you are my chosen protector, my mate guardian." Owen let out a low whistle. "That's not good news, is it?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "It is binding law, old law, even hunters must obey it." Ethan stared at her. "You're saying they can't touch me?" "Not without judgment," she said, "and judgment takes time." Time was something Ethan needed. As if to prove her words, the air outside shifted again. This time light appeared. A thin beam descended from the clouds, striking the field 100 yards from the barn. The grass bent flat under unseen force. Figures emerged from the light. They were tall, armored, their bodies wrapped in dark metal that reflected no color. Their heads were smooth, faces hidden behind glowing slits. They moved in perfect order, spreading out, forming a wide circle around the farm. Ethan felt anger rise in his chest. This was his land. One of the figures stepped forward. A voice echoed across the field, cold and clear, translated into human sound by unseen machines. "Shelterer of the fugitive," the voice said. "Present the asset." Lyra stepped forward before Ethan could stop her. She stood tall despite her size, her markings blazing bright. "I claim protector bond," she said loudly. "By elder law." The soldiers froze. A long silence followed. The voice returned, slower now. "State the bonded party." Lyra did not hesitate. She turned and placed her hand on Ethan's chest. "This one." Ethan felt every eye turn toward him, human and alien alike. His heart pounded, but he did not step back. Another silence. Then the voice spoke again, carrying something like disbelief. "Bond acknowledged. Temporary protection granted pending verification." The soldiers stepped back, weapons lowering slightly. Owen let out a breath he had been holding. "Well, I'll be damned." The light withdrew. The figures melted back into shadow. The pressure in the air eased but did not vanish. "They'll verify," Owen said quietly. "They'll dig into their laws until they find a way around it." Ethan looked down at Lyra. "You just called me your mate guardian." She looked confused. "That is closest word." His ears burned. "People here will misunderstand." She tilted her head. "Are they hunters?" "No," he said, "just curious." "Then no danger," she replied. Ethan was not so sure. The next morning, news arrived faster than the sun. Owen had barely finished setting up a wide signal jammer when a pair of dusty vehicles rolled down the road. Neighbors. Farmers from miles away who had seen the lights in the sky. A woman named Clara stepped out first, her face pale. "Ethan, what's going on? My radio went dead last night." Behind her came two more men, both carrying tools that could double as weapons. They stopped when they saw Lyra standing near the barn. Silence fell. "She's not dangerous," Ethan said quickly. "She needs help." Clara stared at Lyra, then at Ethan. "That thing from the sky came here." "Yes," Ethan said, "and it's staying." Lyra stepped forward again, calm and careful. She placed one hand on her chest and spoke slowly. "I am under bond," she said. "This land is protected." The words did not matter as much as the tone. Something in it made people hesitate. One of the men swallowed. "Ethan, you married an alien or something." Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. "It's not like that." Lyra looked at him, confused again. "Bond is life tie," she said honestly. "Closest is husband." Clara's eyes widened. "Husband?" Ethan rubbed his face. "This is getting out of hand." Before anyone could say more, the ground trembled. A deep vibration rolled through the fields, strong enough to shake dust from the barn beams. The eggs beneath the floor pulsed brighter, faster. Lyra gasped. "They are trying breach." Owen ran to his scanner. "They're scanning underground, looking for the eggs." The sky darkened again, clouds twisting unnaturally. A second beam of light dropped closer this time, striking near the barn itself. The voice returned, harder now. "Protector bond disputed." "Asset carries prohibited lineage." Lyra's hands clenched. "They lie." Ethan stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the dirt as the air thickened. "She's under my protection," he said loudly. "You want her, you deal with me." There was a pause. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal burst across the sky, not from the hunters but from the eggs. The barn floor cracked. Light poured up through the boards, not blinding but strong. The eggs responded to the threat, their inner glow shifting color, forming sharp, clear patterns like symbols. Owen stared at his scanner. "These aren't normal offspring," he said. "There's something else." Lyra looked down, fear and pride mixed in her eyes. "They are defenders," she whispered, "for weak worlds." The ground shook harder. The hunters hesitated, clearly unsure. The voice spoke again, but now it sounded strained. "Withdraw bond subject. Immediate compliance required." Ethan did not move. He looked at the barn, the land, the people behind him. He had spent his life keeping this place standing against storms and loss. "No," he said simply. The eggs pulsed in answer. High above, the hunters' formation shifted. They were preparing to force the law. And whatever was about to hatch beneath the barn was waking up. The shaking did not stop. Dust fell from the barn roof in slow streams. The boards under Ethan's boots creaked as if the ground itself was breathing. The light from beneath the floor grew stronger, filling the barn with a soft glow that pushed back the shadows. The neighbors stepped away from the barn doors, fear clear on their faces. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm. "You didn't tell us about this." "I didn't know," Ethan said truthfully. Lyra knelt, pressing both palms to the floor. Her markings flared bright, then settled into steady lines. Sweat ran down her face, but her eyes were focused. "They are waking early," she said. "Too early." Owen moved fast, setting devices along the barn walls. Thin panels unfolded, locking into place with sharp clicks. "If those soldiers decide law doesn't matter anymore, this place becomes a target. We need time." "Time for what?" Ethan asked. Owen glanced at the floor. "For whatever is down there to finish waking." Outside, the air screamed. A blast of force slammed into the field, flattening grass and ripping fence posts from the ground. The neighbors shouted and ran for cover behind tractors and trucks. The barn doors burst open as wind and light poured inside. 3 armored figures floated down, held by invisible force. They did not touch the ground. Their weapons were raised, glowing with contained energy. The cold voice echoed again. "Protector bond overridden. Human interference declared hostile." Lyra cried out. "False claim. You break elder law." The lead soldier turned its head slightly toward her. "Elder law obsolete." That was when the eggs answered. The barn floor split wide, boards snapping like dry twigs. 5 shapes rose slowly from the ground, lifting soil and roots with them. They were no longer eggs. They unfolded like living machines. Smooth outer shells opened into layered forms, glowing with controlled light. Limbs extended, not sharp, not cruel, but strong and balanced. Their surfaces shifted color, copying the brown of soil, the gray of wood, the green of crops. Ethan stared in silence. They were tall, taller than any human, but they moved carefully, aware of their space. One turned its head toward Ethan. There were no eyes, but he felt seen. Owen's scanner screamed. Energy output just spiked off the scale. The soldiers hesitated for the first time. Lyra stood, trembling but proud. "They are guardians," she said, "born to shield, not conquer." One guardian stepped forward, placing itself between the soldiers and the humans. Another moved to shield the neighbors outside, its body forming a solid wall as another blast struck the field. The blast broke against it and faded. The hunters reacted instantly. Weapons fired, sharp lines of light cutting through the air. The Guardians moved with calm speed, intercepting each strike. Their bodies adapted, surfaces shifting to absorb and redirect energy. Ethan felt something change inside his chest. Not fear, not awe, trust. "They're protecting us," he said. Owen nodded slowly, "and learning fast." The lead soldier's voice grew sharper. "Unauthorized bioconstructs detected. Planetary contamination risk elevated." One guardian raised an arm. A wave of energy spread outward, not violent but heavy. The soldiers were pushed back midair, their formations breaking. Lyra's voice rang out, stronger than before. "Withdraw, you violate law, you reveal yourselves." For a moment the sky was silent. Then something new appeared. High above, far beyond the clouds, a massive shape shifted. Not a ship, but many ships locked together. A fleet. Clara screamed. "There's more of them." Owen's face went pale. "That's not a patrol, that's enforcement." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then they're going to see what enforcement looks like here." The Guardians reacted before anyone spoke. One placed a hand on the ground. The soil hardened, spreading outward like a shield. Another raised its arms toward the sky. A signal burst outward, invisible but powerful. Owen's equipment lit up. "They're broadcasting, not just locally." "Broadcasting what?" Ethan asked. Owen stared at the data streaming across his screen. Everything, the bond claim, the law violations, the fleet's presence over a non-aligned world. Lyra's eyes widened. "They are calling witnesses." The lead soldier turned sharply toward the Guardian. "Cease transmission." Too late. The sky filled with light as new signals answered. Distant ships, observers, neutral worlds. Ancient monitors that watched the old laws. The fleet above hesitated. For the first time the hunters were not alone. The voice returned, but it was no longer cold. It was careful. "Stand down," it said. "Negotiation requested." Owen laughed softly, almost in disbelief. "You just forced their hand." The Guardians lowered their arms slightly but did not retreat. Ethan stepped forward into the open barn doorway. He could feel the power in the air, but he stood straight, shoulders back. "This is my land," he said. "You don't get to decide what happens here." The voice paused. Then it spoke again, quieter. "Human farmer, you are now recognized party to interstellar claim." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Recognition does not require consent," the voice replied. Lyra moved to stand beside Ethan. She placed her hand over his heart, a gesture that felt natural now. "He is bonded," she said, "and Earth is under witness." Above them, the fleet slowly pulled back, not leaving but no longer advancing. The Guardians settled into positions around the farm, standing like silent towers. The neighbors watched in stunned silence. Clara whispered, "Ethan, what did you just start?" Ethan looked at the fields, the barn, the quiet land that had somehow become the center of the stars' attention. "I think," he said slowly, "they started it." High above, signals continued to spread. Across the galaxy, eyes turned toward a small farm on a quiet world. And the balance of power began to shift. The night after the fleet pulled back was the quietest Ethan had ever known. No wind touched the fields. No insects sang. The Guardians stood motionless around the farm, their tall forms blending with the darkness like living statues. Soft light pulsed along their bodies, slow and steady like calm breathing. Ethan sat on the porch steps, staring at the sky. Lyra sat beside him, her legs folded, her hands resting on her knees. The glow of her markings was dim now, peaceful. Owen worked a short distance away, speaking quietly into a transmitter, sending data out into space. He looked tired, but there was a sharp light in his eyes. "They're listening," Owen said finally, lowering the device. "More than listening, they're arguing." Ethan let out a breath. "About us?" "About what they're allowed to do to you," Owen replied. "And what happens if they try?" Lyra tilted her head. "Witness law is strong," she said. "Old eyes have seen." Ethan glanced at her. "Does that mean it's over?" She hesitated. "The hunt is over, the watching is not." Ethan nodded. He could live with that. By morning the world remembered how to move again. Birds returned first, landing carefully on fence posts and barn beams. The cows lowed, hungry and impatient. The neighbors came back too, drawn by worry and curiosity they could not ignore. They stood at the edge of the field, staring at the Guardians. "What are they going to do?" Clara asked. Ethan shrugged. "Same thing I do, protect what's here." One of the Guardians shifted, turning slightly toward the group. It lowered itself, bending at the knees until it was closer to human height. The ground did not shake, it was careful. Clara swallowed. "I think it understands us." Owen nodded. "It does, better than we think." News did not stay quiet. Within days, the sky filled with ships that did not threaten or hide. They stayed at a respectful distance, broadcasting greetings, questions, and warnings. Earth's governments noticed. So did Earth's people, but the farm remained untouched. No soldiers landed, no demands were made. The watchers watched. Ethan refused to leave. "They'll want statements," Owen said. "Meetings, protection." "I don't need protection," Ethan replied, looking at the Guardians. "And I'm not going anywhere." Lyra stayed too. She helped around the farm, learning quickly. She fed animals, fixed tools in strange but effective ways, and spent long hours communicating with the Guardians through patterns of light and touch. At night, she sat beside Ethan, watching the stars. One evening she spoke softly. "My people will come." Ethan looked at her. "Soon." "Yes, not to hide, to live," he nodded. "There's room." She smiled at that, a small, real smile. Weeks passed. The Guardians became part of the land. Crops grew stronger around them. Storms broke early or bent away. Machines failed less often. The farm thrived in quiet ways that could not be measured easily. Others noticed. People came not to take but to see. Farmers, scientists, curious souls who stood at the fence and whispered. The Guardians never moved to stop them, but they never left their posts. The fleet above slowly thinned. One day, a final message arrived, broadcast across open space and translated into every known language. The hunting empire had withdrawn its claims, not because it wanted to, because it had been exposed. The Guardians' broadcast had reached ancient councils, neutral systems, and species long silent. Evidence of broken laws and erased worlds spread like fire. Rebellions rose, treaties shattered. A quiet farm had become a mirror. Ethan listened to the message in his kitchen, the old radio crackling with voices from far beyond Earth. He turned it off and went back outside. Lyra stood near the barn, watching the sunset. The light painted her markings gold. "It is done," she said. "For them," Ethan replied. "What about us?" She looked at him carefully. "You are still bound," he smiled faintly. Figured, she stepped closer. "Bond can change, grow." Ethan met her eyes. "I'm not much for ceremonies." "In my people's way," she said gently, "living is the ceremony." That felt right. Months later, the Guardians began to leave. Not all at once. One by one, they lifted from the ground, rising into the sky with quiet grace. They did not vanish, only moved outward, spreading to places that needed watching. One stayed. It stood at the edge of the field, facing the horizon. Owen watched it go, shaking his head. Humanity just became very hard to ignore. Ethan leaned on the fence. "We always were." Lyra rested her head against his shoulder. The farm was still a farm. The barn still smelled of hay and earth. The road was still dirt. The sky was wide and blue. But now when people looked up, they remembered something. That strength did not always come from armies. Sometimes it came from a quiet man who chose to help a lost girl. And sometimes that was enough to change the stars.